welcome to week 2 of the S word, and we are talking about singleness. And so my name is Brooke, and this is...
I'm Aldrika.
And if you weren't with us last week, what we kind of touched base on, and we would want you to go back and watch, of course, is we talked about singleness and how it is actually an opportunity and it's not a setback. But so many times we have believed and bought into the lie of culture that if we are single, it's a setback. It makes us feel this shame, and it comes with this stigma. And along with this stigma, it has kind of manifested into our own personal lives because we've believed it. I believed it. You've believed it. And so we want to kind of talk through those stages of what we've gone through as single ladies, still single, and what that looks like now.
So our desire is not to prepare you to find a spouse, which I think that what we talk about will ultimately do that for you. But this is not one of those conversations. This is specifically a talk to help you all get your eyes focused back onto the Lord, how to make use of this season of your life. So I think that one big part of singleness is definitely having your eyes fixed to Jesus. So if you want to talk about contentment, if you want to talk about growth, if you want to talk about how to be okay with where you are and not have, the idolatry of singleness become a thing, or the idolatry of marriage become too much of a thing, the cure to that, the answer to that is looking to the Lord.
Yes, that's so good, because when I think about even any talks you hear about singleness, whether or not we will admit it, a lot of times we want to listen to those talks because we want to know, give us the secret sauce. Tell us what we need to not be single. Tell us, and this is it right here. This is, if you want to know what the secret sauce is, it's not about what we could do to get someone. It's about what we could do to better develop ourselves. So and that's looking to Jesus. So I think this is a great topic.
So what Brooke talked about last week was how culture has influenced the way in which we see singleness, but also culture has flipped us around to seeing the world in the wrong way. So I want to read this quote from A.W. Tozer, and it says, "It will require a determined heart and more than a little courage to wrench ourselves loose from the grip of our times, culture, and return to biblical ways." So within this talk today, we want to walk you all through the stages of singleness, which are different for each person. She has a completely different perspective than I do, but we want to reveal the truth of what we struggle with, but also put a biblical gaze on how we get through these seasons and how to help you walk through the season of singleness.
Yeah, so our desire is that you would find yourself in a little bit of our stories, but then you would also be able to identify where you are, what stages. So we want you to be real. This is a moment where wherever you are, even hopefully get paper out, a journal, be real about where you've been, start searching yourself, and because your story is going to look different than my story, it's going to look different than Aldrika's story.
Absolutely. So let's jump right in. Okay, so for me, I got saved actually my junior year of college. I was 20 years old, and prior to this, I had been in some pretty terrible relationships. But ultimately, when I came to the Lord, I was totally okay with being single. It was fine, life was good. But then I started going to church more. And if you have been in any Christian setting anywhere in the world, somebody somewhere is going to bring up, are you single? Are you dating? What married people are doing, how married people and all the blessings that they get. There's a constant focus on my relationship status. So with that caused even this questioning in me of oh, should I be doing that?
Yeah.
So what about you?
I feel like for me, it was kind of the same, but for different reasons. So I came to the Lord my 5th year in college. That I was a 5th year senior, and so praise the Lord, He got me out right in the nick of time. But I remember in that moment. So I have actually always dated. I mean, since I can remember, since I was in 5th grade, that was my first boyfriend, and always dated all throughout. College, high school, I had a boyfriend 5 years, went to college, and I was always with someone. For me, it was always my relationship. So when I actually gave my life to the Lord, there was a moment of I'm just ready to focus on myself. I'm ready to look out for me, and I wasn't focused on anything else. But just give it a few months even, and you have people asking you those questions, putting those thoughts in, and then you all of a sudden, I think my mistake was I did start to look out for that other person more than what my original desire was to try to develop myself. And so that's kind of where I was in that stage.
Yeah. So as somebody who did not date a lot, it wasn't a thing that I focused on being in a relationship. But then again, you get to church and the desire is to focus on the Lord. But then it becomes like the focus of like, oh, well, who's in the room with me? So that contentment
Yes.
essentially shifted into like this internal rebellion in myself. So I think that for me, the next phase was that rebellion of the misunderstanding of why God created the union in the first place. So for me, at that time of like the search of entering the church and kind of being around these different guys and what Christian culture had taught me about just being single, I think it turned into like this need to feel something for myself. Like it wasn't even about being a reflection of the union of God and why God created marriage, which is ultimately God sacrifices himself for the church, which marriage is a symbol of that on earth as a sign to the world, because who else loves that way? Who else gives himself up for someone else other than a married couple? So that was not my focus by any means. It was more so like, well, they said I should have it, so I want to go get it. I feel like I'm inadequate because I'm single, so I need to have somebody with me. It was not to glorify God. It was mostly to satisfy and fulfill a need within myself. Do you relate?
No, I totally relate. I feel like for me, I was in the same boat. I also think it was like I didn't grow up, and maybe you can relate, I didn't grow up with Christian parents, so I wasn't in a Christian home. Just saw a lot of brokenness, divorce, and I never actually saw a Christian relationship. So when I jumped into the church and started to see Christian marriages, I think that sparked a desire for me to want it. So it was selfish in a way, because I was like, I couldn't wait to start my own family that I had like the ability to have like a good family. Like I feel like I had this picture in my mind, like, oh, I'm going to create this amazing family, and it's like, if we're going to love Jesus. And so like, I just like, it kind of excited me, but it was for all the wrong reasons. So like those are good things. Like that's a good desire, but I did not understand what marriage was about. So I was in that same boat.
So same, pretty much. I had not seen healthy dynamics between men and women at all. So even there's a tension in me of like, yes, I want to be married. Yes, I want to be in a relationship, but also I don't really know what that looks like. Do I want to be a part of that? I also had like this just deep sense of self-righteousness, and that I just had no desire to be rescued or wooed.
Same. Yeah, I understand.
Right, because that's what culture showed us. That's what all the relationships I had seen, like the man comes in and he just loved this woman, and I just wanted no parts of that. Or even the suggestion of like those typical Christian books that are very overly feminine, I wanted to read none of those things, which again I think was a form of self-righteousness, because Christ gave himself over the church, which includes the individual me, the individual you. So there were clearly some broken things in me that needed to be dealt with in order for me to actually accept love when that time came, but also see God in the right way.
Yeah, and I think that's like kind of been our journey all throughout the singleness, like in one of the stages. It's learning to see God the right way. And you can't do that if you're so focused on self. And when I'm honest about my stages, in all of my stages, it's been about me. Like it's been about me. It's been about, even when it comes to dating someone, and that's the thing, marriage isn't about you. It's about you guys. It's about someone else. And so I think that's been like the biggest thing for me, realizing how selfish I've been in my singleness.
So from that, the selfishness, which thank God that he does not leave us where we are. I think the next step, which was like a big place for me, was going from this internal rebellion, realizing that I had some just misidentified all these attributes to God and how he wanted to love me, which actually transitioned into this spot of being discipled by someone else. So it was actually discipleship that flip the switch on everything. So on our Instagrams, before we actually started doing this, and in preparation for this teaching, we asked some of you to tell us what things you wanted to learn about singleness. And we also asked married couples to share what they wish that they had known before they got married or were in our positions. And so many of them said the same thing: get discipled. Whether in singleness, whether in dating, engagement, and marriage, like we all need to get discipled. So for me, once I started to be discipled by an older woman who had actually just started dating her now husband, she was the one who kind of challenged me, like, do you see God's love the way that you should see it? So that, and thinking about that in preparation for this brought me to this verse, Romans 5:5, and it says, "And hope does not put us to shame, because God's love has been poured into our hearts through the Spirit who has been given to us." God is telling us that he has given us his spirit so that we can experience this love. It's not like this God who is in the sky and far from us and intangible, but he's giving us his spirit, which doesn't dwell in a tree or in a cloud or in a bush or different things. He's put his spirit in us so that we can experience his love, which I think that was a big part of what I was missing in my warped view of singleness. Do you feel like you felt that way at any point?
Yeah, no, I mean, you hit on it with discipleship. So I think discipleship is, because the problem is, and because culture has made you think singleness is like this shameful thing in some ways, it's almost like you don't talk about that much in discipleship.
Yeah.
So when I'm thinking discipleship, I'm thinking intentionality on what you're going through with this, especially discipleship with someone who's older than you. Like when you mentioned that, like someone who is married, getting different perspectives and stuff. And so for me, I feel like where I needed that the most was I had to be honest with what my singleness was doing to me. And what it was doing to me was making me think I'm not good enough. It was making me think I'm not pretty enough, like I'm not worth being pursued. I mean, all these lies. And what discipleship did was it had someone else tell me, Brooke, that's a lie. Like that's not true. But the reality is that's like, you don't want to say that to someone. Like, so discipleship, you have to be open, you have to be vulnerable and tell them these things. Like there's the general prayer request, like, oh, pray for me, I can't wait to find my husband. But no, we have to go deep and be like, I am dealing with some real insecurities because of me being single. And so discipleship it's what flipped the switch for me. It was like what brought this journey of, I want to get real about this topic and not just put a Band-Aid on it and hope I find a husband. And I think that's what a lot of people do. There's nothing wrong with that, but I do think a lot of marriages, they go in with people who aren't whole and healthy. And I think we're going to get into that more, so I don't want to go on a tangent.
No, you're okay. You're good. So even what you're saying, like it flipped the switch. For the person who was discipling me did not do like this, hey, well, here's how to find a husband, or this is what you need to do to fix these warped views of singleness. It was, hey, first of all, I need you to get reckless in your abandonment to love the Lord. That is what I think what changed everything for me. And in that, which again, God is so good that he's very intentional. Even God is intentional with how he disciples us. So for me, like I said earlier, I did not want to read any of those feminine books, blah, blah, blah. I was just not that girl. But there was one day, I remember it still vividly. I was in my car driving to a meeting, and I felt the Lord say very clearly, like, hey, I want to teach you why I made women. And I was like, Lord, no, I'm not reading any of those books. I know we're part of creation, but he's no, I want to show you why you are a part of my heart. So, and in that moment, I knew it was time to read that book.
Especially when you're telling God no, it's like, okay, I'm not going to win this fight.
Right. So all you ladies who know what I'm about to say is actually captivating. And the male version of this is actually Wild at Heart. So there's two different types of books, but it talks about God, the way that God crafted us is ultimately a reflection of who he is and what he designed the world for. So when I read that book, it actually opened my eyes to how deeply women specifically are loved by God, and those soft attributes about us and our femininity and our romantic and all those sweet things. While that may seem like God is like this fierce lion and like justice and a sword, but God is also a lamb and gentle and made flowers and the sky blue and things that are beautiful to look at. Beauty is also a part of God's nature. And in realizing that, I think that did something in me, like, oh wait, God values me individually and I want to love him in return. So that same person who discipled me, actually later, she asked me to be a bridesmaid in her wedding, and someone was officiating her wedding, and they said this, and it changed my entire life. And they said, in response to the Lord, not necessarily even the union that the guy was officiating, but the right response to pursuit is to pursue in return. And I'm sitting there with those flowers in my hand. I'm like, oh my gosh, that is the Lord speaking to me, and not to some man or to whoever I'm going to marry. Like, yes, whoever pursues me, I will pursue him in return. But that was the Lord's heart for me. Like, he pursued us. He went to a cross. He lived. He died. He rose again, and still gave us his spirit to follow after us all our days. So my response to that kind of love is to go find that love and pursue it also, to seek God with all of my heart.
Can I confess something?
Yeah.
I haven't read Captivated. I am that girl, and I haven't been against it, but I was the girl in the minute. It's like, I refuse to. Now, honestly, I just have a lot of other books, and I'm totally open to what you said. I was like, oh no, I caught up. But what you're saying, it's so good though, because it makes me think of, if the goal is to represent Christ, like marriage, we want to represent Christ. The goal in our life is to understand what Christ's pursuit really was for us, and that's what you're talking about. I'm like, oh, that's a light bulb moment. Like, we have to not just say it, like, we have to experience it. The way you experienced it at that wedding, the way you were like, wow, God, you pursued me. If we don't personally experience that, we can't possibly expect to do the same when it comes to our marriage.
Yeah.
So, that's great.
That's a word. So in that, I was like, okay, well, God loves me, and I'm free to love myself back. So can I start looking now? So the search began. So where I was reluctant before, I was willing to embrace my desire for marriage. So did you ever get to the spot where like, okay, I'm ready to do this now?
Yes, every year, like it's like my new birthday and everyone, when the new year happens and it's like, so I finally get to the point where it's like, I'm ready. I'm totally ready for marriage. And so for me, it's always like in January when that new season's coming and people say, this is your season. Something big is going to happen for you. And I'm like, yes, God, I'm ready. And I do think throughout the years, the Lord's revealed things to me.
Yeah.
I would say, hey, I do think I'm in a position now where I am ready, but there is that search. But the difficult part about the search is, what do you do when you feel like you're ready? You feel like you're starting to search, and it's like crickets. Like, then what? That's the next stage. So talk to me a little bit about that. Is that something?
Yeah, no, I 100% feel that. I think that I think that a part of the struggle has been just the lack of opportunity in general. But the truth is, I think the biggest struggle of that lack of opportunity, it was me constantly looking for the opportunity.
Yes,
so we're going to GLC, we're going to youth services to go lead, we're going to the UA on Sunday nights, and we're showing up extra cute with the intentions of seeing whoever's in the room. So, and I think that there was some inadequacy that was built because of that, because there was not really much there available. Do you feel like you?
Yes. I mean, like when you get really real, and that's what we want to talk about, it's like, okay, I'm going to go to this micro church. Like, no, I don't want an all women's micro church because I'm trying to find my soulmate.
Right.
So I want a co-ed micro church. And you go to micro church and it's like, blah. And then, you go to the UA services. It's like, all right, let me see. Now I'm too old. I'm like, I can't go to the UA services anymore. But everything, it became crippling. It really did, because everything I was doing, I wasn't doing for the glory of the Lord anymore. So then it's back to the wrong motives. It's back to selfishness. And I'm doing it. Like, yes, I'm still passionate about what I do, and I do love the Lord, but I realized that I was walking in with the lenses of any event, anything we did, of like, could this be opportunity? When that's constantly in your mind, it does something to you.
Right.
And so that was another stage, I think, where it's like, this is not healthy.
Right. Something's wrong. So I think what was birthed out of that was the next stage of just discontentment, doubt, and then the lies settle in. So at this phase in my life, I think I hit the point where I had to be honest, and I think many of you will have to too. It's like, well, I think I'm wrestling with idolatry. And ultimately, idolatry is exalting the gift above the gift giver. I'm exalting this desire to be married, this desire for singleness to end above God himself. So when I'm going into these settings where I'm supposed to be leading, or I'm supposed to just be intent and intimate with the Lord, I'm coming in there looking for someone as opposed to just seeking the Lord, where my reckless abandonment in the beginning was totally about Jesus. And then it becomes like, well, I want this void in my life to be filled. So now I'm constantly looking for somebody and I'm not looking for the Lord.
And then it ends up breeding discontentment. It's exactly what we're talking about. And I remember, I think it was with you, Aldrika. I was thinking about this moment. You don't know what I'm going to say, but I think I remember having this conversation. I was like, I don't think any girl could ever honestly tell me that they are content being single. I don't know if you remember that, but I remember thinking like, because I was thinking about myself. Like, I remember thinking, like, this isn't a real thing. People just say it. They just say it to say it. But, when I was in my stage of, like, real discontentment, I remember thinking, like, this is it. Like, there is no real contentment. Like, I think that's, like, a huge stage to realize. Because I think I need to realize, okay, wait, God, if you tell us not to be discontent, that means it is possible we can still be full, that we can be content. So I have to get rid of this lie that it is impossible for me to be like, I was just writing off people. I was like, because you hear the stories all the time. Like, I finally found my mate when I finally wasn't looking for him anymore. Or I didn't care anymore. And you just get tired of hearing it. It's like, I think I'm always going to care. Like, it was like this
I'm
stage.
never going to not care. Like,
so I feel that's where I was with that.
No, for sure. And I think even in that, like this, I want to not care so that he'll come. The root of that, of where that's coming from, is this idea that marriage is the ultimate prize, the ultimate goal. It's going to keep you from loneliness. It's going to satisfy you. Your life will start when you're finally married, when that's not true. So another one of those lady books that I read that I eventually gave in and started reading.
They're good.
They are good. It's called Lady in Waiting. In it talks about this young woman who has all this beautiful china that's been passed down to her from her family, but as opposed to eating on it, she chooses to eat off of paper plates instead of the china. So it's almost like this, the parallel is,
I get it.
yes. And if you don't, the parallel is us choosing to settle for less of a life, or to do less things, to travel less, to stop, to hold out on these experiences of things that are good and beautiful for the sake of this thing that we're waiting to come, that may not ever come. But even when it does, life can still be full and beautiful, even if, it doesn't happen the way that I want to. I can eat off the china now. I don't have to eat off paper plate. I don't have to settle for less because marriage isn't happening to me. So
I think it's good to recognize what those things are, because I know even for me, I'll read certain books. Like I want to grow in my relationship with the Lord, and I remember when I was first learning about Sabbathing, right? And I always heard it in the context of your family, like, hey, on a Friday night, like have your family like do this together and sit down together, and you're gonna start it at this time, and I just remember like I can't wait to get married so I could Sabbath, like. Clearly that's just such a misconception. And when I had that thought, I remember thinking like, no, like I could have the china, like I could enjoy things now in a different, it's going to be different. It looks different, and I've established it, and I love it. But I think we look so much forward, like we limit ourselves so much.
Right. For me, I think that it was traveling. Like I want to go do mission trips, and I want to go out of the country, and I want to go to my favorite cities, all with my spouse, with my mate. And essentially I stopped, or I wasn't having those experiences because that person wasn't in my life. And then it kind of clicked. What am I waiting for? Either I'm going by myself, or my girls are coming with me. Yeah. We're going. I'm going to go travel, whether there's a man in my life or not, because God created all of this world for us to experience and enjoy. But I'm limiting myself because this particular person isn't in my life. And if you follow me on Instagram, you will see I be going.
That's right.
I'll be out. So I think also a part of that disappointment is us even watching some of our close friends who are younger than us actually get married a little bit earlier. You want to speak to that?
Yeah, no. So I mentioned in the first, I'm 32 already. So it's like, and I work in youth. I've worked in youth for 6 years now. I have students that I think are about to be married before I was married. And it's like, what? Like, but the reality is you're starting to see people get married, your friends, your close friends, not just people younger than you, but even your closest friends. Like that's tough when your closest friends are starting, because you're also getting rid of your friends in some ways. They're obviously still there, but the dynamic of their relationship changes. And so it makes you feel like back to disappointment again, or even loneliness, a different loneliness, because I think so many times you're so used to that world, and then worlds start to shift and stuff. So and you've experienced the same thing too.
Yeah, relationships definitely change as friends kind of move away and get married. Like things get different. But I think even a part of like the struggle of close friends getting married, it comes along, like family is also a big part of that too. Yes. So I come from a fairly large family. I have 3 older sisters and a little brother, and all of my sisters are married. All of my sisters have children, and I am the baby girl who my parents love and adore, but I have never brought a man home to my father. So I was never gonna be that girl who had like a bunch of different guys coming home to my parents. Like when that man enters the door, that is the man. And it's okay if you've let your parents meet the guys you've been dating or the girls you've been dating. That is beautiful, and I think that family should very much be a part of that process. Yeah. But for me, I knew that the guys I liked were not worthy of meeting my dad just yet. So nobody's met my father in that way. So my family's constantly asking like, what's going on? I mean, and this. Every holiday, every picnic, every lunch day, every birthday, every chance that my family, that my immediate family, my extended family can get, they're constantly asking like, hey, why are you not with someone? Where's the guy?
I get it. That's my family too. And so I think the hard part for my family is like I said before, I was always dating before I knew the Lord. Yeah. And now I know the Lord. And I think that in some ways could distort the view of like, oh, now that you have God, like, are you a nun? Like, you know what I mean? Why is it? And it's because I can't explain hard enough. Like, no, like, I will not compromise. Yes. I refuse to and that's such a hard topic to explain, especially to someone that doesn't have the same values as you. And I've seen so many friends compromise. Like, it's like this tough thing, but family pressure is hard. Every holiday I go home, where's this person? Why haven't you started looking? Who is this? Like, and you feel like you're doing something wrong. You feel like you're missing out. And exact same thing. Like I experienced it I had someone from my family tell me once, I feel sorry for you. Like literally they're like, I feel sorry for you. You have too many friends. Like when are you going to get a husband? And I was like, and it was so mind blowing. So I'm like, well, I think like having friends is a good thing. And I knew what she was saying was, I feel sorry for you that you're not married. Like, you're just trying to just fit in all these relationships. And I know that their view was completely wrong, but these words, they still matter to us. Like, they still matter. And that's why we want to talk about it, because it is still tough when people are constantly coming at you with that. So,
well, have not had anybody tell me that they felt sorry for me. But another thing that my family does in lieu of that is they have just tried to hook me up with so many different people.
I would be afraid of my family trying to do that.
I have said no every single time. As you can tell, I'm still single, and it's as there's like that pressure and like, oh, should I say yes? Like, is this a good idea? And
yes, there is pressure. There's pressure. It makes you. So I said, like, I don't want to compromise, but I think we've all been at that point of like, well, you know, you're. Oh, that's a whole other topic. I was like, I could go into so much stuff.
I know.
But
and even in that, in us wanting to, I guess, fill the void, even the pressure that family puts on us, like there have been times where there's been opportunities for something to happen. Like it's potential, it's on the horizon.
Right,
and then there's like false hope at the end of it.
Yeah, and I'll never tell my family about any false hope, because I'm like, I've learned, like, until like we're like really dating, it starts to seem serious. I'm not going to get it. But I mean, false hope, that's a real thing too. Like, talk a little bit about that feeling. Have you had that? Like, have you had false hope?
Yes, there have been opportunities where things could have happened, where you're getting to know someone and you click and you really like each other, and it's great, and it seems like it's about something. And for a variety of reasons, which I'm sure all of us have experienced to some degree, it fizzles out. So it leaves you in the spot of like being let down, and even again the lie setting in. I'm like, okay, well, this is just never going to happen for me. That was the opportunity. It didn't happen, so maybe I'm never going to have that void filled, or never going to be satisfied.
Yeah. So. I mean, it's like riding an emotional roller coaster. I feel like you go through so many, like, this is it, and then you're praying about it. Exactly what you said. I've experienced it. It's like, and you think it, and then your community's like, that's the one. Like, you have all the voices, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, this isn't it. Like, just kidding. And it's that disappointment. Like, that's like the feeling, like battling the feeling of disappointment in relationships. Like, those are real things, and we have to, and that's why it's so important that before we even try to go in the search, like, you might get disappointed, it's okay, but that's why we have to have a great foundation. Yeah. That's why we have to have we have to have our gaze in the right place, because the second we start making dating our God, or our future husband our God, then when we do get discouraged becomes more than discouragement. It becomes detrimental, because you know what I mean? So, and that's why foundations are super important.
Absolutely. And I think that, again, having that foundation where there is that period of like questioning, like, God, this is a desire of my heart. Will you ever feel it? Will I ever see this in my lifetime? Having the right foundation, that yes, you are a human being, you are going to think that, you're going to feel that, but having the right foundation helped me move to the next stage, which was accepting change. So like we mentioned before, our friends are getting married, people are moving away. Gainesville is just a transient city that we obviously both live in, graduated from UF, and we're still here. So a lot of our friends and our communities have changed and shifted over time. Because I am deeply in love with the Lord, I'm able to remember that if God is sovereign with the birds of the air and this building standing up, and with the intricacies of your life and the intricacies of my life, then he must be sovereign in the relationship that I am in or am not in, and I trust his timing with everything. So do you feel like you've gotten to a place like, you know what, God, I believe that this is okay?
Yeah, no, 100. I mean, I look at scripture, and every time I look at scripture, I'm reminded God wants his will for our life more than we want his will. And I am not missing. If I am where God wants me to be, then I don't have to worry. You know, it's like when Abraham, like the story, Abraham, he sends his servant out to go and find a wife for his son. He's like, you know, and he prays, like, hey, if this woman comes up to me and asks if she could give my camels water, and it happens. And it's like, even stories like that are like, okay, God, you are so in things like this, even, that I have to trust that. And that goes back to, you were talking about week one, we have to write the right story. And the story is God is working, he goes ahead of us, he goes behind us, he's working with us, he is, and I think even when it comes to, was it change, the word, like the adapting to change friendships? I think one of the biggest things is being honest with it. Like, it is tough. Like, we're adapting to different, and it's being honest with those friends too. Like, the way we feel when things are changing or people are moving, we have to be really honest with that with other people. It doesn't mean we're right or wrong, but it helps bring out to the open to where it's like, oh yeah, you are in a state of like, I have to be cautious of like, Aldrika could feel lonely right now, or
Right.
Brooke could feel, so it's just like, yeah, all those different things.
Yeah. And I think that even the beauty of the shifting community has allowed different people to enter in my life. Like, I'm still close to all my friends that have moved away, and the ones who are still in town who are married and have different lives now. But with the shifting of that community, I have now been able to invite older people who are wise into my life. I think that is also a big principle. Like we said, get discipled. Now I have the space for older women who I can list all of you. Thank you so much. So if you're in that spot where like my community is changing and the people who I was close to weren't around, like we strongly suggest now is a great time to let older men, both married, single, divorced, whatever, widow, all those different things, to let them into your life, to speak life into you into this season. And I guarantee you, all of them are going to say the same thing. Be where you are. You don't need to be ahead of yourself. You don't need to be behind, but you need to be present. Because I think even the human condition, and same thing going back to the garden, we are always thinking about what we don't have and always thinking about the next season. If we have this, then we're enough, and all these different functional saviors. But the older people in my life have reminded me, like, when you get there, when marriage happens, it's going to be beautiful. It's going to be great. But there's nothing like being single now, where you can wake up when you want. You don't have to think about anybody else. You can spend your money how you want. You can eat what you want. You can do whatever you want. You literally don't have to contemplate how anybody else feels or what else they want from you. So I think that my friendships changing has allowed me to be able to get wisdom that I didn't get before, because I was just locked arms with my best friends.
It goes back to what we talked about in the first week, which, like, it is an opportunity, but we have to see the opportunities. We have to start looking for them. When we're so focused on all of the setbacks, or why this isn't good enough, or why this will never work out for me, you're missing out on what you now have open. And as soon as you said, like, oh, well, now that like my friends are gone, like what I have open is my schedule, and I'm going to invite some older people into my life. I'm going to invite people to mentor me and disciple me, and like, you're taking advantage of the opportunities you do have right now. So
absolutely.
That's great.
So I think that even leads into the next phase, which was, for me, was, like you said, scripture, Matthew 6:33, seek first the kingdom. And again, all these other things will be added unto you. So even if it's not added unto me in the way that I want it to, the greatest commission, the mission on my life, is to make disciples in all contexts. So whether that's married, whether that's single, whether that's in Istanbul, if that is here in Gainesville, the desire of my life, the calling on my life, is to make disciples, is to seek God's kingdom and bring heaven to earth wherever I am. So the focus of my life is no longer about trying to make marriage happen and be a good man's wife or whatever that looks like. It is making disciples. So a big part of that, of seeking first the kingdom, is knowing your Father in heaven, which the 3 M's, knowing your Father in heaven, your master, knowing the mission, and knowing who your mate is. Do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, no, like, this is great. You need to know, keep the first things first. First, it starts off with God. And that's like even like our living in the green model, where it's like worship. Worship has to be the first thing. We have to look to God. We have to keep our things rooted in God. But it's important to know our mission, our purpose. It's important to know that, because the reality is when you're becoming one with someone else, you are dying to yourself. And if you guys have 2 completely different missions, someone is going to have to sacrifice. Like, that's just what it is. And but God, his kingdom works in such a way where there are people who actually have the same mission. And you have to know, if you go into a marriage, and this is the danger I see with younger couples getting married, is they're in a phase where they haven't really figured out that mission part. And I've talked to them. I've heard this happen before, where it's like they're just so conflicting because their missions are now different. And it's not like that was a sin, or, you know what I mean? But it makes it a lot harder. Like, they're going to have to sacrifice now. And so you do want to become in tune. We're so focused on finding that person that sometimes we don't find ourselves. We don't find our own like purpose, our own mission. So we have to find we have to go to a master and mission, like God, but then also the mate. And then so that's why even that order matters, because before you find that other person, he has to fit in with those things. So she, if you're a guy, like, she has to fit in with those things.
So I even think in the last 7 years of me being saved, the person that I wanted to marry when I was 20 is definitely not the man that I want to marry now. Even my desires are different. Back then I thought I was going to law school. I am not going to law school. Like I said, last week I'm actually getting my master's in marriage and family therapies. So my heart is social justice, race issues, people with disparities, therapy, mental health counseling, all those different things. My husband doesn't have to be a therapist as well, but I need him to be on board and passionate to some degree about those things, so that he is supportive of me. And I pray that, you know, whatever his mission is in his life, I fit into that as well, because that is almost, for me, it will be to the point of almost disobedience for me to not finish this master's
Yes.
degree, to not go be the counselor that God is calling me to be. And I am not going to sacrifice the call on my life for another person.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. No, that's super great. And that is why it's so important that we talk about that.
yeah. So I think, so moving from like, all right, well, God, I know what you've called me to, which is the season of life that I am in now. I've transitioned to this place of praying.
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 Yep. So now what? Praying.
Right.
And I don't know if we're going to talk about this a different time, because we are doing a Q&A, like our very last time's a Q&A. But one of the questions both of us got was, how do you pray in the waiting? Which is a great question.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk a little bit
Yeah.
about even what prayer looks like. What does prayer look like for you now? Like in the search, like what?
In the search, so for me, I think that, so I do have the list, and as the years have gone by, and if you don't know, the list is like the things, the qualities that I want in a husband. As the years have gone by, that list has become less and less shallow. It's more focused on godly characteristics and in his heart and who he is and how he loves other people. I do want him to have a beard. That is a thing, but it's not about all these physical shallow things, these shallow things that don't matter. My prayers have been focused on refining of his character, preparing him to be a good husband, that God would show him what his mission is in life, and that I too would do those things. Because what praying for your spouse does, your future spouse does do for you, it also refines you. Because there's no way that you can pray for him and then you not be those things that you're asking him
Right,
for.
you're praying, God, please let him be a godly guy.
Right.
Please let him seek you every day, 2 hours. And you're like, well, I don't even seek you like that long.
15
You know, like
minutes.
it kind of makes you self-evaluate a little bit. So I think what's helped me is there was a book. I don't know if you have the book,
Yeah,
but
I
it's
do.
like the book where you write out all the prayers. And then once you finish the book, what I've done is I pray through that book. And
So-
that's how I pray prayers for my future husband.
Yes, there are two different versions. There's 31 prayers for your future wife and 31 prayers for your future husband. I also have it too.
Yeah. Those are super great books. So I think it's really great to be able to have that, like just know how to pray, because even when Aldrika was saying, like my list has drastically changed.
Yeah.
It's gotten way less shallow. Right now my list is like, God, just let them love you and breathe. Like, no, I'm just kidding. My list is more specific, but I'm just saying as years go on, you really do realize the shift in how things change.
And what that does, if you're wondering, hey, why would I pray for someone that doesn't exist? Why would I even have this list? In the same way that you would pray for your parents or for the future or for what God has next for your life, you would want to pray for a spouse now so that you bear much fruit in that season that is to come. Because why not? Like, why not have the Lord's blessing there before you even get there?
Yeah. I mean, prayer, just to be clear, like it's not just empty words. We're not just babbling to, like, it really does work, and it doesn't just change circumstances, but it actually changes us. And so that is what the key is too. God has this way of working, like we're praying for our husband, and in the moment, it's just what you said. He's refining our character too. So yeah.
And even going back to even the beginning with the idea of prayer, we talked about how relationships can become idols in our lives. I think that what praying and being honest with God about even how you feel about marriage, where you are in your singleness, whatever stage that you're in, praying gives you the space to hold the desire, but give it to God.
Yeah.
So as opposed to like constantly thinking about it, meditating on it, letting it control you, magnifying it and letting it control you, you're giving it room to say, hey God, this is how I feel. I'm handing it over. I'm not hoarding this. I'm not keeping this all to myself. I'm giving it to the Lord.
And just to be clear, if you have something that is like that you have to deal with before you get married, getting married is not going to fix that. So let's go ahead and start praying like now about it. Yeah.
So even just going back to that, one of the things I wrote on here and I deleted, but we're talking about it now is marriage is not going to fix things. And I think that is what I thought marriage was going to do for me. And I come to the realization that all the trauma that I've endured, the things that I've endured in my life, I was about to start projecting that onto somebody else. Yeah. And it was going to become their baggage if I didn't get healthy. So regardless of where you are, the things that you've dealt with, the PTSD from other relationships, the heartbreak from other relationships, unless you deal with those things, unless you get to a place of wholeness and repentance and healing and forgiveness, you are going to give that to the person that you spend the rest of your life with. Yeah. So thank God that he slowed me down to help me get my heart right and to get my mind together, my soul together, my relationship with him together before I started to project all those crazy traumas onto someone else. So essentially in all of that, and we're going to talk specifically about wholeness another week, but we both could say that we've gotten to the last stage of where we truly believe that life is good.
Yes.
So one of my favorite verses of all time is Psalm 23:6. It is surely goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. That is a promise. Surely goodness and mercy are going to follow me.
Yeah.
They're going to hunt me down. It doesn't say, hey, goodness and mercy will follow you if you're married. God's goodness and his mercy in my life is with me everywhere I go.
Yeah.
So whether I'm married, whether I'm not, I think that I can still be content in all circumstances.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, that's like a verse I always say to myself too, because if anything is going wrong or bad in general, I'm like, no, like, because surely goodness and mercy is going to follow me. So I think we're going to end up this session right now. And so what we're going to do is we're so excited to talk to you guys next week. So I think we unpacked a lot of stuff as we were talking about our stages, and maybe you heard us talk about things like even wholeness, for instance. And it's like, wait, tell me more. We're going to get into those things too. So hopefully you were able to identify with some of these things tonight. Hopefully you could kind of even figure out your stages. And then next week, we're going to talk about the struggle, like the struggles that there are. We're going to talk about Paul when he's even talking about like, hey, it's better to be unmarried. Like, I don't think like I personally in a place where I have that desire to be married. Like here's how I think Eldrika has that desire. So how do we like wrestle with that? What does this mean exactly? So I'm excited to talk about that. What we're going to do is we are actually going to go into discussion groups. So there's a link below. Please get into that link. There's a link for the guys and a link for the girls, and we're going to kind of talk this thing out. So thanks for joining us tonight, and we can't wait to see you next week.